Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to day 14 of the ERP Cloud Bootcamp. This is the review course. Today, we're still looking at developing and debugging in that kind of technical design and build process. And today we'll be looking at approvals. Now, approvals are very, very important in various areas of the application, and they're used mainly for control purposes. And we're going to be looking at some of the core areas of approvals and looking at how to build an example and looking at the core elements that you need when you're building approvals. Most of the work for approvals is done in the analysis. The building is usually done by people who have some technical skills, and the functional aspect of it is where you would really design the requirements. Well, you ask for the requirements, and then you start to get involved with the rules from a controls perspective, and also how you can help the organization to adhere to their approval policies and controls. And there's usually a delegation of authority group that would normally look at this. So today we'll look at various aspects of this. We'll explain approvals management. We'll look at the key concepts, and also we'll look at the task and task configurations for approvals management, and also the explanation of that, and also how that's actually done. So let's start off with a very quick overview of how this works from a technical architecture perspective. Now, approvals uses workflow, and these are automated, and this is where information and data are passed using tasks from one user to another user, or it could even be a group of users. It could even be passed on to another application. And the key thing there is that there has to be an action taken, or maybe for consideration. Maybe it's just a FYI for your information type of thing. And then what comes out of this automated process is an action to achieve some kind of end result. Now, the way in which this works is that Oracle uses a middleware. And the middleware that Oracle uses has a number of core elements that you need to look out for. And I'm just going to go through some of those core areas. It's basically an application server that is used for the approval management, and it uses a modeling language called BPM. So you don't need to worry about the details of that language unless you want to be a developer, and you would have to go into the details of how that modeling language works. But from a requirements, from simple build perspective, you can do quite a lot even as a functional person in this space. So let me just walk through the process of what happens from a technical architecture perspective. So let's go into the details. So what you have is you have the Fusion Approval Management Engine, and uses the AMX, which is Approvals Management Extensions. So all this is within another server. So the look and feel looks different to the standard Oracle applications. This is the Fusion apps. And this is because it's in a different part of the server. So what first happens is that you create a document, and then you submit. I'm using an invoice as an example. You submit the invoice and you validate the invoice. Now, if the invoice validation is not successful, you'll see some error messages. You act on the messages, and then you go on with that cycle. Now, once validation is successful, you can then proceed on to the approval. Now, if approval required is switched on, then it will invoke a task flow when it's initiated. And then that can then be used to monitor, assign, and complete the approval flow within that. And then once that's completed, you can then see that the document is approved, and you can look at it from there. So that's basically what happens from an architectural perspective. You've got links back to user work list and notifications, so you can see notifications on your page, on your home page. You can see notifications coming in via emails, and also via the routing from this AMX engine. And there's a lot of improvement in these areas from the initial version. Oracle are still improving the product. There's still a lot of changes happening from releases to releases. So always watch out on this space. Now, one thing I need to mention is that the way approvals are set up within each of the different modules may vary. For example, in procurement, you have a front-end look that allows you to build your approval rules. In finance, you have a spreadsheet upload that you can use to build the approval rules. It has its limitations, so I'm not going to cover that part on the course, but there are some limitations on that. And then I'm just going to take you into the core engine and for you to look out for and the things you need to look out for when building these rules or writing your requirements for approvals. So I'm going to go through the core flow, and normally you would submit the document. I think this is probably a repetition of what I've just mentioned. Approvals enabled, you continue processing, root documentation. Okay, yeah, this is just similar to what I've just shown you, but this is just a core flow as to if its approval is required and whether it's approved or rejected, and there are other things that you could do within that. Now, what I'm going to do now is just look at some of the supported approvals within the finance space. So you've got general ledger, you've got invoice approvals for GL, payables, you have quite a few areas that approvals are supported, which includes invoice approval. Now, in general design, let me just go back to journal approval. Most journals would not really require approvals, depending on the source of the journal or why the journal was created. So if you have a manual journal, then you would most likely have approvals from a controls mechanism. So you don't want somebody going in there and just creating journals. Journals must have a reason why they're created if they're manual journals. So you may want to put in approvals for manual journals. So that's just an example of where you would have approvals for GL. For payables, if your payables document is coming in from, let's say, an external source, it's possible that the invoices have been approved before they come in or interfaced into Oracle. If not, then you can route invoices for approval based upon the source. So if the invoices are coming in from an external source where they've been pre-approved, yeah, you can also have something like a pre-approval rule that will not necessarily approve the invoices. So you just do it straight through. Or let's say the invoices relates to a PO, which has already been matched, receipted, then you don't need the invoice to be approved again. So you may just say if it's PO related, then you don't need approval. But let's say you have non-PO invoices which haven't been pre-approved, then you may need to write rules for it. So those are the kind of things that you need to think about when writing rules or approvals. And then you have hold resolution, which is also using invoice approval. So if you have a manual hold or you have a system hold and you want somebody in the business to act on that document to release the hold, then you could use your hold resolution approvals to do that. A good practical example of this is receipts. So you're matching to PO, but they haven't been receipted. And it's common practice. I wouldn't say it's a good thing to do, but most people in procurement just want the goods. They're not thinking about going back to receipt the goods in the system, and invoice comes into accounts payable, and accounts payable say, no, we can't pay this because it hasn't been receipted. And then that goes on a receipt hold. And then what then happens is that this then goes out for approval. So you could send a notification to the person who needs to receipt the goods, so that they will then go in and do the receipting, and that would then release that hold. So those are the kind of things that you could do from a process perspective for hold resolution. And then you have payment approval. So mainly used where you've got payments that you want to be approved before it's been paid. So as part of your payments process, you could put in payment approval in there. It's got its limitations, but it's there as a solution as well. You got invoice account coding. So if you've got invoices from an external source and you want that to be coded, so invoice comes in, it probably goes into a default account and you want it to be coded correctly, then you could then initiate approvals for invoice account coding. So these are just examples of use cases for payables. And you would most certainly have some of those examples I've just mentioned on almost every finance project. Expenses, again, similar kind of thing, expense report, cash advance spend authorization. Again, this is just approving expenses based upon the data that you've entered. So, and also the expense policies. And then you have intercompany. If you're using intercompany transactions, receiver distribution. So this is where the intercompany transaction goes to the other part of the company for approval, receiver approval. And then you have budgetary control. Again, if you want to override the budget, then you may need to put in some controls there to say that that needs to be approved before you override it. Receivable, very light touch on approvals. For receivables, the only one you've got there is credit memos. When you raise a credit memo, then it can be routed for approvals. And also for cash management, for bank account transfer, you can also have approvals before you transfer. So these are the core areas within finance that you have approvals. There is a placeholder for fixed assets approvals. It hasn't been implemented yet. It's one of those areas where it's required, especially for things like asset transfers and so on and so forth. So again, even though we're not covering that in this course, I just said, let me just mention that. So I'm going to go into a quick overview, and mainly approvals are for controls. So as mentioned that before, controls workflows for business objects such as your invoice and so on. And then you can define complex routing rules, different stages, different task routines, the different attributes, and this can be really, really complex depending on your business requirements. And then you can also have approvals based on supervisor hierarchy, and then those are the core areas that we're going to look at in a few minutes. Now, in terms of the setup, you have two main areas. You have approval groups. Now, one thing about approval groups is that they're optional, and you can maintain a set of users who can act on workflow tasks. For example, a chain of approvals for maybe a cost center, or maybe another type of expense. Let's say, for example, you're purchasing assets, or maybe a computer, and you want the IT department to have a look before you actually finally approve that invoice. So that's an example of where you could use approval groups. There are limitations on approval groups. Those of you who are familiar with AME in Oracle EBS, and you can create dynamic approval groups, you don't have that within Fusion. So it's manually maintained. And again, that's an area where it needs to be improved from a solution perspective. So again, watch this space. Those are areas where you could see changes in the future where you can have dynamic approval groups. So we've got task configurations where you can define approval policies, and this will determine how and when tasks are routed. You can, for example, specify that if the invoice is less than a certain amount, then it needs to be, can be automatically approved, or maybe some of the things that I mentioned earlier on. If the invoice is of a type PO, we got PO in the header, for example, or the lines, then you can say that let it be automatically approved. So those are just examples. So I want to go through some of the key concepts, and then once I run through the key concepts, then we're going to look at a use case scenario, and I think we should be okay. And we do that on the application. So conceptually, you have your task configuration, and for all the approvals, the concepts are pretty much the same, regardless of whether you are using approvals in supply chain or maybe in finance, or I don't know so much about HCM, but I believe conceptually the structure is very similar. Now, so the first part is you have a task configuration, and in your task configuration, you have the list of all the different approvals that you can perform. So let me actually just jump into the application to show that to you. Let's have a look. So this is the application, and this is the space. But to get here, there are different ways in which you can get to that point. You can go into setup and maintenance, and go into financials, and let's just search for approve. Okay, let's just do that. So you can see some of the other ones: application extension, manage approval groups. Now this will open up the BPM layer. So let's click on which is this layer here. So this is where you can then search. So here you can then search for the task. Now, just to mention a few things about this. So the task configuration that I've mentioned here, each of these will have a name that will be linked back to the type of approval. Unfortunately, I don't have a list of all the different names and so on, but the key ones for finance, I can see if I can get that across to you. Now, if I type in fin AP and the asterisk, so it's not percentage. You don't type in a percentage for the wildcat on this server. This is a different part of the application. This is using the BPM. And click on this little arrow here. Connection to the server failed. Okay. Let's try this again. Not sure why that's failed. Let's go back to task configuration. Okay. Fin AP star. That will bring all the different task configuration that are linked to AP. Star will bring back everything, and there are loads. There are quite a lot. So let's see if this will bring back anything. I've never searched on everything before, but see. Sure what's going Yeah. Let's do it again. Fin AP start. System slow again. Let me switch off my camera just in case that would, maybe it's the internet connection. All right. Oh, so it's just brought back everything. This is everything. There's loads and loads and loads of tasks. These are the configured, these are the task types. So let's go back to Fin AP. And the naming is not standard. So it goes Fin AP invoice. So this is the invoice approval. And so within your task configuration, you then have some bits which is encompassed inside of it. So you have your assignees, which will have, again, I'm going to come into this in a minute. So let me just go through this first, otherwise. So you have your task configuration, which are all of this that you see at the side here. And then what you have are rules. So each rule will have a condition, and we also have an action. So a condition could be maybe an if business unit is X and invoice amount greater than Y, then the action is sent to the supervisor for approval. So that's an example of a rule. So all of these are just the participants, and these are all the different stages between that. So I'm going to let me go through that and then come back to this to take you through this. So what you have is in here you have participants, and you could have within, actually, let me mention something about rules. As I mentioned about the action, you have action type, what you can do. So it could be that maybe you want it to be to approve, or you want it to be automatic, or maybe you want it to be an FYI. And then you have the participants, which is then used for the routing. So I could say that if I have a participant, which is FYI, I expect the rule that's inside of this participant to bring me an action, which is for your information. So no action is required, but it's just notification sent to someone just for them to note that this action has, whatever is happening in that rule is happening. And then you have parallel. So the flow within each of these can be a parallel flow. It can also be a serial, and that determines the order. Yes, that's what I was looking for. The order in which things would happen. So whether you want them to happen in parallel or you want them to be one after the other. So parallel can be assigned to multiple people at the same time. A serial can be assigned to one person at a time, and it's according to the defined routing. So you can also have a single participant within this participant type. So one person acting, maybe based on behalf of a group of people. So, and this is where you have something called a first responder win. So if I send a notification to a group of people, and I've got the task within that to be single, then I'm expecting one person in that group to act on behalf of everybody. Or if I say that I want everybody in the group to act on it. So I have the options to say that I want consensus, which is everybody to act, or I want the first responder to win, which is my single. So again, you have what is called a voting regime within this routing. So it seems complicated, but it's not that complicated as if you try to understand what is going on. So let me switch to the vertical view, and this gives me a structure. So I have a structure here. This part of the rules will work first, and then this part of the rules will work afterwards. So this first part, you can see the name of this grouping here. So this is a stage. This is another stage. So this is a stage. Once the stage finishes, then it goes into this other stage. So in this, you've got stage, which is which could be for line approvals, which could be for maybe the header. So in your stage, you have different stages. Within each of these, you have participants. Inside the participants, you have rules. Rules will have conditions and actions. Each of these could have a rule and an action. Each of these would have rules. So they're all kind of embedded inside each other, more like a set. So if I look at this stage, each of these are participants. Yeah. So, and you can see that some of them, this one, for example, you can see these icons here. They all represent serial. This icon here. So serial, remember that one person, well, it can only be assigned to one person at a time, even though this can be sent to multiple areas, but one person at a time within this group will act on it. And then you have, anywhere you see this icon. So there are icons. This is parallel. Anytime you see this icon here, it means it's parallel. And normally you would have things like FYIs and so on here. And then here you have a single participant. And here you have FYI as well. So again, each of these, you have different types of rules and conditions you can place inside each of these. And they're all governed by these rules that we have here. Now, so inside each of these, we have a rule. So this is the participant. Inside this, we have a rule. So let's have a look at the rule. So if I click on this blue dot and select go to rule, it will open up a list of rules. And each rule here will have a condition, and then we'll have an action. So that's basically what, how it's done. So here it's saying that if invoice header amount is same or more than 1,000, and invoice and is of type invoice, which is standard invoice, and is not France, then this is what should happen. You should start building a hierarchy to get the manager, who's a supervisor, to approve. And these are the kind of rules that you have. So you can build a rule. So you got this one is an auto approval rule, which is, so if it's less than 1,000, then it's auto approved. So you can write as many rules as you want. But this rule, you have to think about it, that this rule is being executed all at once. And if you bear that in mind, whatever rule you write, you need to think about what if that rule is not met. Otherwise, your rules engine will not be able to execute. So you need to think about, if I write a rule to say that if it's not France, what about if it's France, as an example? So I've got a rule here to say same thing, but if it's France, this is what I want you to do. I've got a rule here to say that if it's less than 1,000, what about if it's more than 1,000? So this is a rule here to say if it's more than 1,000. What about if it's more than 1,000 and it's France? Yeah, then you go into manager rules, more than 1,000 France. So you have to think about all the different possibilities that would happen when you're writing your rules. So that this is where the design comes in. From your end, you have to start to think about how the rules affect each other within each of the stages and what you want the outcome to be. So that's that's what the functional person will design. The technical person will go in and do this setup. It's really setup, but from it's config, because you're not writing this code. All these codes are, if I click on edit, I'll be able to edit these codes. And if I go to assignee, and let me just show you what it looks like. Let's go to rule. And okay, why am I not seeing all this? Okay, let's go back here. Invoice approvals set. And let me go to auto approval rule. So you can see this is the rule here. All these are variables which you should be able to find out, you know, invoice header, invoice amount. All these are variables that can be selected from here. So the person who's writing these rules is picking these items from this list, build these rules. So I'm not going to amend that. I'm just going to leave that as is. So that's how the rules are built, and you have the structure, you have your stages. So these are the stages, and key things that stages will organize the approval flows in logical categories like the header and lines as an example, and also each task, as I mentioned, will have at least one stage, and then stages can be either parallel, serial, and they can be predefined, or you can even create multiples of this yourself. Other things that you have your participants. So if you've seen different types of participants, which we've mentioned. You have rules. You can also have rule sets, which will flow in this specific order. You have business object level, which could be your header and lines. And then you have your voting regime, which I mentioned earlier on. Consensus approval, everyone agrees, majority approval, and so on. So you can define all of this. And the key in terms of builders, when I say builders, I'm talking about when you look at this. Let's go back. Yeah, let's go to when you're looking at the way this is built. Starting participants, list builders. So there are certain list builders that you can use. So conceptually, you have supervisory. You know, this is your hierarchy of employees and managers. It's you use the HR setup for that. You got your resources. Which is a specific user or maybe an application role. You've got approval groups, which can be created serial or parallel. You have job levels, which you can also use as well for your hierarchy. And you've got position, which you can also use. Position is not very common. Some people do use it, but there is a maintenance overhead with using position. Very similar to what you have in EBS, those who are familiar with that. But most will use this for rather than using positions. So in terms of the approval routing, you've got the assigning to supervisor, which is, so if you're using assigning to supervisor, manager, you need to have a manager in your relationship. So you've got to have a manager there. So if you remember, when creating the employee, we actually gave it a manager. So that means that it will route to the manager. So if the person creates the requisition or maybe the invoice, and if you're using assign to supervisor, then it will route to next person up in the chain. Then you can use job levels to say that rather than routing to a specific person, which is your supervisor, it can route to someone who has the job level. So you've got that as well. And then you can also route assign to positions rather than assigning to people. So you can use positions for that. And also you can assign to an individual. You can also assign to a group, or you can set so that it will auto approve or auto reject. So in terms of the actions, so there are approval actions. You can approve that will complete the approval activity and progress the document to the next level. You can reject, that changes the order status to reject. You can request information, you can reassign or delegate to someone else. You can create a subtask to get responses from more than one approval. You can escalate to others. You can suspend. You can withdraw, and you can save. So these are all the different actions that you can do within approvals. So that's just an example. I just want to go through one use case and actually, yeah, so, and then we just go through a demo. So just one use case, and then we go through a demo. So we can say this is an example of any invoice with an invoice amount of more than $500 requires approval by the finance approval group. So this is an example. And then all we're saying here is that the business supply invoices are created in several different invoice currencies, and for purpose of approval, they must all be evaluated in the US dollar equivalent amount. So again, you can put rules in there to do that, and approval group needs to approve any invoice. Depends on the business unit of the invoice and the cost center on the invoice distribution. So you can put in rules to do those kind of stuff. And all members of the group must approve the invoice. So that's going to be using your consensus, and then any invoice with any invoice which has an invoice less than $5,000 should be automatically approved. So again, these are the kind of things. So this one will be an auto approve. This one will be in serial. So you have to put that in serial in approval groups. If it's matched to a PO, it can be skipped. But these are the kind of things that you start to think about when writing your rules. So here we've got invoices not matched to a PO must be approved by one level of supervisory hierarchy. Any such unmatched invoice must have requester available on it. So again, these are the kind of rules you could put in, that it requires a requester. If it's not matched to PO, then it should be rejected, and so on. So these are the kind of rules you can actually put in. So invoice not matched to PO, requester details are available, auto reject, skip. Again, these are the kind of things that you could be asked to do when building these kind of rules. I'm going to try and see if, based upon the rule that is set up here, I'm just going to try and see if we can do this for our setup. So first of all, we need to enable approvals. So if I go to payables and my common options for, no, actually it's in my invoice options. Sorry, let's go to invoice options. Yeah, I think it's invoice options. We need to enable approvals. Slow again. I want to enable approvals. Slow. I think probably quite a few people are using the environment. Maybe that's one of the reasons. Who knows? Whilst we're waiting, I don't know if anyone has questions, and I can start to take some of these questions before this loads.
Yemi.
Yeah.
So this area of expertise, like building workflow and all that kind of thing, is there like a specialized area that you can be asked to come on a project and build up?
Yeah. There are people who specialize in those areas, but because it's an area where, depending on the complexity of what they need to do, in most cases you should be able to do it. Yeah, but yeah, so let's have a look. Yeah, so there are people that are specialized in BPM. If you're going into areas like supply chain, that's very heavy in a lot of these workflows. So,
but if you can do the functional and whatever, that's an advantage as well.
oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And that's why I'm showing this to you now, so that at least you have an advantage in how in using this. But
Okay, all right,
yeah,
thanks.
it's very slow. So, but I do have this on the video where you can watch this if we're not able to run this. And I looked at it earlier on today and it was fine, but I'm not sure why it's not loading. So let's try again. Financials, payables, manage invoice options. Any other questions while we wait for the page to load? There we go. So if you scroll down here, you select enable invoice approval. And I'm just going to select allow force approval. And then you have other things like require validation before approval. So you want the invoice to be validated before you actually approve it. Then you have accounting preference. Do you want to account regardless of approval status? Do you want to require accounting before approval? Approval before accounting. So again, you have options. So I'm just going to say require approval before doing the accounting. So let's save and close. Now, if I try to create an invoice, this should invoke the rule that we had before. That rule. So let's go to payables, invoices. So I'm going to create two invoices. I could actually use my Postman to create my invoice, but let's do one of these. So let's go to supplier, lease supplies. And invoice number, INV 20. Actually, let's go to 2303 1746. And I'm going to create one for less than 1,000. I'm going to put my requester here, who is set up man. And let's go to lines. And 200. My distribution set. 624 101. Cost center 1140. Let's click on OK. So save this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to initiate approval for this. Let's validate first. And then this is going to go forth for approval. So that's validated. So now I'm going to kick this off for approval. So let's initiate approval for this one. I've got a question here. It seems to be, I seem to be unable to access recordings from our sessions. Oh. All right, okay. So, okay, I'll show you how to get to this navigation for this one. Okay. So this is approval is initiated now. So that's started. This should auto approve. So I'm going to save and create another one. This time I'm going to create an invoice for over 1,000. Because our rule is if it's less than 1,000, let it auto approve. If it's more, then it needs to go for approval. So let's have a look at MV 2303-1748 and just make it 2,500. Requester up man. Because it's a non-PO invoice. If it hasn't got a requester, then it would fail. So 2500, my distribution 624 101 and cost center 1140. So that's let's save this and then validate the invoice, and then let's set this for approval. So this should go to my supervisor, which is Anita Kennedy, for approval. So let's have a look at this approval history. So that's gone for approval. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to save and close. I'm going to refresh my and have a look at this one and see if this has been approved. So have a look and see. Validated. Approval initiated. let's go to approval history. It's still initiated. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to show you how to view the status when you are approving. So I'm going to go into tools and look at the transaction console. Again, this is where you would be able to check the status of your approval, and there's a lot of, okay, I'm not going to archive anything, so let's go into submitted. Nothing in progress. So these are our invoices. So this one has gone to Anita Kennedy for approval. This one is still in progress. You can use the refresh. So once this is finished, it will be completed. This should be auto approved. This is going to Anita. So I need to log in as Anita. File, new private window. Let's go into Anita. Check to see Anita. Kennedy. So there should be a request for Anita to approve the invoice. So if I go into the list, if you get this error message, don't worry about it. So as I mentioned, it's just Anita hasn't got access to view some of this report. So action required approval of invoice. So 1 minute ago. So let's open this and see what we have. So this is what the Anita will receive even via email, on our mobile, and this can be customized. Well, it's actually a BI publisher output. So you can actually change some information on here. And these are the actions Anita could perform on this. I also view the invoice, but I'm just going to approve it or reject. So let's approve. So once it's approved, submit this for approval. You can put some comments, add attachments, and so on. So once it's approved, we can refresh this, and that should complete. That should be completed. So it's gone, disappeared. So let's go into completed status. Which ones are completed? So they're both completed now. So I'm going to go into the invoice and view it from here. Actually, let me go back to my transactions. Invoices. So we only approved this one, but this one is auto approved because it's less than 2,500. So I'll go back to my invoices. Let's look at 48, the one that Anita approved, and go into view approval history. You can see the path of how it was approved. And for the second one, this would have auto approval. So that's assigned to automatically approved. So automatically automatically approved. So that's basically how the rules work. Very simple demonstration, but there's so many use cases that you can use for this. Okay. Question here. Okay, you won't be able to see how to access. So to access, go to your student dashboard, and it's actually, you should be able to see your Agile implementation bootcamp review sessions. And what I've done in the community as well, every day I've put in the link to the recording, so you can actually go in here and this will bring you to the link of the recording. So here you've got review sessions. These are the old review sessions, and this is the March 23. These are the review sessions that we've had. So that's how to navigate to there. Or you could, from your dashboard, just select Agile Implementation Bootcamp Review Sessions. And then you're able to see the details. So if you bring this back up, go to the next one down here, you'll be able to see all the ones that we've done. And also you have this take a notes feature. So use this as well to put notes in here. These are your personal notes. As you're going through each of the different areas, you can write some notes here as well to help you in case you want to come back to it. And this is not just on this, on all the courses as well. If you're running through the videos on any of these sessions, you can always use the note feature to add notes on each of the different areas. Even if it's assignments, you can write a note on that, so on. Some of this is just to remind you, maybe to do something, or maybe you want to come back to it later. You know, but that's there. And even in any of these sessions, if you need to very quickly chat to me, you can very quickly just ping me. If I'm online, I'll be able to respond instantly. Otherwise, I get a message.
So yeah, thanks for that. So just to confirm, the March 2023 bit of the review session will bring us to these sessions we're having currently.
Correct.
The one above it will be for the older recordings.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Okay. Can existing workflow approval rules from EBS be converted? No. New config is required. They are very, very different. The EBS workflows use PL SQL. They don't use PL SQL at all. So I'm not familiar with PeopleSoft, but the engine that Oracle uses is I'm not sure if that's what PeopleSoft uses as well, but from an EBS perspective, you have to rewrite the rules. Yeah. Yes, Mr. Dairo.
Okay. Good evening. Thanks. My question is not actually from the approval, but I asked on where is it, on the platform, actually, the study platform. So
Okay.
My question is about the sandbox.
Right.
Okay. So now, if you implement your sandbox, then I tried to manage values, to create a new value set.
Yeah.
It was saying that you are in read only, and it's because you are using a sandbox.
Correct.
So you need to, so I'm saying, how do you implement your sandbox to be your default home page?
Oh, no. Well, okay. The purpose of having a sandbox is for you to do some setups in there. When I say setup, I'm talking about personalizations and so on. Now, if you start to now use the application with your sandbox, then you're in development mode. There's a lot of things that you will not be able to do. So I wouldn't recommend you using the sandbox like your default page and so on. No, but once it's published, then everybody else will then be able to see what you've published.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
that's exactly my question. So
Yeah.
you need to publish it so that it can retain that settings.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And that means it's changing for everybody.
Everybody, yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
So it's not to you only when you do. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
No problem. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I mean, does that mean that if like you use a sandbox and publish it, people can go in and then use another theme that has been published kind of thing? They can change it.
Yeah. Somebody can override it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But don't publish it on this platform because
No.
a lot of people are using this, and
Okay.
it would just be unfair.
Sure.
Yeah. I've seen on some environments that we've got before that people kept on doing that, and it just messes up so many things because, for example, there are certain, it depends on how the person has published this sandbox and what they've done. And in some cases, they, because it's for practice, people don't follow certain development rules, and it just messes up some other things. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions before we close for today?
My last question would be about approval. You said this for Fusion is not dynamic, unlike what we have on EBS, right?
That's creating approval groups. It's not, you don't
approval
have
groups.
Yes, you don't have dynamic groups population. You have to create the values in the approval groups manually.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that's I would say that it's a backward step by Oracle. So if I go to approval groups, so all of these groups that you see here, has to be populated manually. Somebody else is going manually and add these people in. In EBS, you could write a query that will populate this automatically.
Yes.
But
we have the two options in EBS where you can either do it static or dynamic.
Exactly. Yeah. So here, dynamic groups, even though it's got here, create dynamic, it doesn't work.
Oh.
Yeah. So
wow.
Yeah, it doesn't work, and the documentation says that it's not been implemented yet. So that's why I said watch out for this. This is kind of that could be done later.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so when that thing is implemented, would it be possible to upload the dynamic groups via whatever instead of doing it manually?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions before we close for today? No? Okay. Thanks so much for joining today's session, and see you tomorrow. Tomorrow we're looking at the sub-ledger accounting and Fusion Accounting Hub. If we have time, then we'll go through FAH as well. One thing to mention, the labs for today. Let me just mention something on the labs for today. Apologies, so today's labs is looking at, today we are day 14. Yeah, enable approvals. So you need to enable approvals in your setup, and then you don't need to build this approval proof workflow. Just follow the exercise, just go through it, but you don't need to, but you can just do your test, because yeah, but this gives you the steps as to how to enable it, and just an example. Yeah. And then I've got an example here of journal approvals. Again, this is for you, in case you've got a requirement for journal approvals. Okay. Thank you, and see you tomorrow.
Okay, so thank you. Tomorrow, we'll look at the subledger, right?
Yeah, SLA. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I asked a question about subledger the other time, so you might need
Exactly.
to-
Yeah.
You remember, right?
I remember you asked the question, but I can't remember the questions.
Oh, the question is the journal line description.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll take you. I'll show that to you. Show you that.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay then. Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.